Okay, so let's do the roll call, please. Okay, who's doing it?
I'll do it. Flintoff, yes. Harry, absent. Noel, absent. Riser,
Present.
Monk,
Present.
Brand,
Present.
Gable.
Present.
We have four.
And adoption of the agenda. Anybody have any proposed changes?
Can you hear us?
Just heard the one. Proposed changes to the.
Ask him right now because I just did something.
Okay.
Oh, oh, I see. You're right.
Meeting.
And that was, Jessica. Yep.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so now we're gonna move quickly to public comments. Do we have anyone on Zoom that would like to comment?
Rob Jackson.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Okay, Chris, you're sitting at the laptop. Could you speak again? Let's hear if the laptop mic is working or the ceiling mics.
Could be the ceiling mic we've set, got the correct settings.
There you go. It is now off the laptop mic and the ceiling mic is working and I can hear you clearly. So well done, all fixed. The only thing I heard last week was that the Zoom audio from participants, on Zoom was a little bit muted. So there might be a volume setting on that, but that's it. Have a good meeting and thank you for fixing the audio.
Rob, thank you for always helping us.
Yes, Rob, are you on retainer?
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else would like to comment?
No,
Okay, then we're gonna move to approval of the minutes. This very rough draft.
Before we just discuss, do we have to put them on the table, motion, before we discuss? No, I wanted to mention that in public comment, it's handwritten in for Renee, because I went back and listened to tape.
Okay,
And she also made comments, so
okay.
recognize I will be modifying that. So we can only do it as amended if you want to.
Okay. Thank you, Judy, for taking the
Yeah.
minutes.
Any other changes?
And just one note.
Yes.
Judy, just so you have it, Klubeck is KLUBECK.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Who made the motion? I didn't.
Ryan, did you make the motion?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, and who's second?
Clinton.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is part of the agenda where we combine the two previous committees. We said we would add status before the competency.
Well, things have been busy with the changeover. So mostly what we've been dealing with is just office space and, getting the employees settled in with the new changes and onboarding, the new employees, and it's been staying busy there. So.
Going with your additionally assigned duties in terms of kind of management, coordination of operations.
It's busy. It's busy. It's, yeah.
More than you can reasonably accomplish.
It's just. It's very time consuming. It's hard to, you gotta put in more hours basically to go through email, and because during the day it's either meetings or interruption, meetings or an interruption, meetings or an interruption, so. Kind of like the front counter, only different.
Mhm.
Do you think by sort of sitting at the front counter, though, that it is, that you're able to differentiate those functions?
What do you mean?
And prioritize?
What do you mean?
So, like right now, by sitting there, you get caught up in answering questions at the counter and cash
Yeah,
receiving and all
it's
that.
either way. If I'm sitting in a different space, they just come and find me there,
Okay, so,
or I'm in a meeting,
okay,
so.
so
it's-
just putting you in a different place, is not the answer.
It didn't, it just, yeah, it's.
She is in it, she moved to a different place. I think there's so many changes. I mean, the board approved, a full-time deputy treasurer position. Ryan has appointed somebody, he's
Yeah,
going
we're
to
still,
start.
we're still waiting to get, like,
Yeah,
Fran
in a
was
flow.
sick today, so.
Okay,
So there's nobody up there but Barbara. Brian's been busy in meetings, so they'll, like, literally, if somebody comes and grabs me, I gotta go.
yeah. So
So-
it's building the capacity, like, for the first time ever in this organization, we're going to have a deputy treasurer at the front taking in
Yeah.
cash, and that's gonna change a lot for Christy and Fran, for the better. Much
Yeah,
better.
cause Fran's been, thankfully, she's been handling it all last week.
Mhm.
So is paying cash still a big thing?
Yeah.
Payments as a whole, not just.
Payments
cash.
as a
okay.
whole, and yes,
Oh, cash, not so there,
Uh,
card and check, okay.
A lot of checks. I took over 120 checks to the bank one day last week.
Don't lose them.
and then, we was troubleshooting the DDA meeting, cause we didn't have, so I was doing laps around the building trying to get people to.
Yeah, I
Notice
noticed
it,
that.
it's just, every day is different, you can't predict it, it's not, you can just sit down and go, oh, today's the day, it's gonna happen. Something will happen.
but I know that we're not here to fix the technical issues with Zoom. But we really owe it to people's time, you and the residents, that somehow we do something.
Mhm.
I'm not a
And
tech,
the
Might
streaming
I-
will get there. so
Might
we
I
need-
suggest something? I don't think Christie starting Zoom meetings, being responsible for that was really envisioned in this role.
Mm-mm.
But now we have two IT people.
Right, and they were both very helpful, they
but
were,
Could they take that?
Right.
off?
but they were, and then they stepped out for something, and then thankfully Rob Pattinson alerted me to it, and you did.
Yeah,
too,
and I got a
Kathy.
text. I mean,
Yeah,
it
so
comes out
that,
of.
it
Christie
just
also.
happens, someone's gotta jump in and do it.
but every meeting we see, not every, I'm over.
No, you're close, cause I get planning commission meeting, had problems one night, I got it,
I mean,
yeah, it
it's-
happened, it's not just
Yeah.
during the day.
So
So
sorry,
I know this isn't the meeting to solve
No,
that,
no, no.
but it
Right.
has to be.
Yeah.
Addressed.
and Chris is back now.
Yeah, he's been, today's
So
his
this-
first day back, so Julio's been great the whole time.
And I just want to acknowledge Aurora too, has been doing a lot of great work with all the onboarding of
Mhm.
new officers, of staff coming back, of movements. And Aurora and Christy have been doing a great job of working. as a
Yeah, she's
team.
been busy, we're just trying to get things organized and in place. So,
Okay, so nothing you might suggest we change?
no,
Okay. Good. All right, so where we're at is, what I suggested is defining this role would take most of our efforts. And I attached a marked up version of the document we were working from. Before we start on that, I want to suggest that we get a little more disciplined in our meetings. Let's set a duration and try to stick to it. I know that one member has a 3 o'clock commitment, so can we try to stick to an hour today? Okay. All right, good. So where we're at on the job description, did you guys have a chance to look?
Yes.
Or 5.
Okay, are there any other attachments that we're gonna need?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, so we, just recap, we assigned the fire, we took the fire chief out of there. We thought that this job description was very much too broad. And then we have some notes that we said we want to add some progress reporting, status reporting, for this position. Potentially add some model for, public engagement. Keep in mind that we're not, assigning somebody's statutory duties to someone else. We'd like to deal with the issue of contract management. I have some ideas on that. So what we've done is we've gone through this and we've lined out language that we thought was not clear, not correct. So starting with administration, we added engineering here because it was not included. It doesn't mean this role has to be responsible for engineering. It's as if we're accounting for, these departments and make sure that we don't lose sight of something while we define this role.
Kathleen, what document are you looking at?
The one
The
that
meeting packet.
Pardon?
it's the job description that we're doing, line outs and red line additions.
In the packet.
Well, it was in the packet for today? Okay, I'll go back to that. Okay, thank you. Ryan is printing that part for us. Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know how you want to go through this document. I'll just say that I have some kind of feedback on kind of sections of it, kind of high level. I don't know if you want to keep going kind of redlining from the top, or if you want to talk kind of more high level, because I think there's 3 sections I would take out of this job description.
And I would too. So do you want, I have no problem addressing the things you want to take out because it winnows it down to a more manageable thing. So, I'm assuming you're talking about HR.
Do you want me to share?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just high level, there's 3 sections of this job description, given the evolution of the organization. We've got a board who wants to not delegate its policy-making authority, and we have much more professional, diverse staff. So I would take out the budget section, the IT section, and the HR section from this job description.
Okay, again.
The budget section, the IT section, and the HR section. And I will tell you, I wrote the IT and HR sections, but that is back when we didn't have an HR director and some other staff. So this was a different time. For the budget, I recommend taking off just the first bullet point. Certainly love all the great ideas about the improvement to the purchasing agent and contract. But the budget, this was written at a time, you know, the statute takes care of this for us. In a general law township, by default, it's the supervisor who prepares the budget. If there is a manager, it's the manager. In either case, the board at any time can assign somebody to prepare the budget. So I don't think it should be buried in a job description. Also, my reflections of the last 5 years is that the manager hasn't ever had the expertise needed to prepare a budget. It's always the finance director with who's ever presenting it. The budget is also a policy-making document. I would much rather hear the first policy proposal from one of the 7 people on the board rather than from a subordinate staff person, because I think the politics get weird there. When you give a staff person the power to sort of propose a budget. So that's one area.
Is there consensus on that? We'll just, anybody have any problems with
Bullet
that?
point 1 is assist the supervisor, ... correct?
Yeah, I would take out the word budget in the first bullet point.
Yeah, I changed it from finance because it's not finance.
It's not, I think it's procurement and contract administration.
Okay, where?
The
Page
second
2.
section,
Page.
Wait. I'm on the page, but you said the first. Assist the supervisor,
so under the section finance budget,
yeah,
strike assist the supervisor in preparing a budget process and policy should be written, strike all that.
For this position.
Okay.
this
Not that
position.
the supervisor
Yeah.
would not have.
Right.
help.
Then you want to keep the second part, act as the purchasing agent?
Yeah, that whole concept is great. The
Okay.
purchasing agent and all of that, that's just totally separate from
Yeah, that
budgeting.
works, sorry.
Well, we're not really doing what a purchasing agent does, but
Right.
I defined it. I think we can make improvements with BSNA based on my current
Agreed.
research.
Okay.
Okay,
The second major section was the IT and data management. This has always been a hope and a disappointment for me. I'm just laying it out there. This was an idea that we had, that we should have this sort of expertise here in Scio Township. We have put this in this job description since 2021. I think it's just, we're asking for too many things from one person. And this is really a specialized thing. We've tagged it on to the end of the project manager description. We've tagged it on to the end of the parks description. We just had a good meeting with Washtenaw County GIS to get kind of a sense of what we need. And there's an emerging, like, I have an idea, which we all need to talk about much, much more in the next couple of years, about we need to bring in, have a GIS person, but more than GIS, the reason, you know, this chief information officer was really to have somebody who can do data analysis, okay? And that really comes to more of a GIS, and I just think that this, I remember being with Diane Benson and working on this language, and I think that this is maybe a whole different position that we're probably not gonna find that expertise in somebody who has the expertise in kind of operations.
I agree. But the concept that it's driven by GIS, it really should be driven by GIS as a tool. Our other major tool is BSNA.
Absolutely. The
And so
assessing roles.
There's analytics in there.
Yep.
So we're saying that we don't necessarily want that in this role.
I would like to have this in the township, but I think it's gonna probably have to be in a different position. What do others think?
Well, that might be okay. But by removing each of these pieces, we are pulling kind of central management authority away potentially from a manager. So for example, going back to budget, if the manager doesn't assist the finance director, who's going to assist the finance director?
So in my 5 years of watching budget and being in, and even when Sandy and Bryce did it, it was Sandy doing it. I mean, and then it was Woodhill, and then I wrote the narrative for Will's proposed budget. And then it was Maynard, and then it was planned. So I think we need to, so then I think it's sort of this facade that, I mean, really what it is a policy-making document. Who do we want the proposed budget to come from? And right now, it's the supervisor. I think that makes sense. But aside, Kathy, from what we put in this job description, at any time, the board could pass a resolution to say, we would like trustee Noel to be responsible for preparation of the budget. We would like whomever. So I just think that burying such an important function of the board in a job description doesn't make sense. And it's just not what happens. It's just a proposed budget. It's largely a financial document that's really, we've got a great process now where the department heads are really populating most of it. So there's not much work in it for this position to do, because others always do it.
Who's gonna provide the ultimate oversight?
Of
The
what?
board?
The board,
Of what?
the budget,
The budget, the board.
the board.
I mean, this is just the draft this is the proposed budget. Who does the proposed budget?
Okay.
Whose name is on the front of the proposed budget?
And every department head and is
So-
working.
So is this that it's really organizing the collection of data from the,
Right, which has always been done by the finance director in collaboration with everybody, but the good thing is, we used to have a budget process that department heads did not participate in. They didn't know what was in their budget. You remember, Kathy? And once a year, the board would talk about money. It was called adopting a budget. It would get presented to them. And, you know, Sandy would make sure everything was, you know, balanced. But now we have a much better process where department heads know how much money they have. They're responsible for procurement. And we're much more sophisticated now. So now we have more of the experts actually producing the budget and not the manager making policy decisions inside Township Hall at their desk before it gets to the board. So I think it's much more transparent and much better informed by experts who are the department heads running things.
To follow up on Kathy's question though about who's overseeing it, who then will do the resolutions that are needed when we have non-appropriated spending?
Oh, that's different. So we handle that. We have a pretty good system
And
now.
who's we, just
Finance, me.
Okay,
I started a process where we do regular budget amendments. So
Mhm.
every quarter, what we're doing now, you guys can change it. But what we do now is regular budget amendments quarterly.
and so the manager did not
Never.
get involved in the deviations and differences?
No, the monitoring has always
Non-appropriate.
been Rebecca, Ally, me, Woodhill, whomever, Sandy before that. It's always been kind of a financial monitoring. And I'm just saying, like, certainly somebody could, but that's something that's already being handled successfully. Because the board, that's why we have our quarterly budget amendments that Ally prepares for us.
There's budget functionality in BSNA.
Right, we're using it
Oh, you are?
this year. I found, yeah, got
Okay, good.
Ally in it.
So the department heads should be monitoring that.
They have for the last 2 years.
Good.
Yeah, they all have access to it and can run their own reports. And I mean, it's much more democratized than it used to be.
Right.
So.
Okay. All right, so, which next?
The last thing is HR. This was written before we created an HR position. And I do think this warrants conversation because there's a lot packed into here, some of which is currently Aurora's job and some of which is not, I would say. Definitely the concept of a township training officer is something, you know, I would like us to aspire to. I don't know how that will come to be or who should be responsible. But what it means to be the personnel director, I think is a question that's come up in the employee handbook edits that have been presented to us. So we want to make sure whatever we do here conforms to where we're going on that. But direct all human resource functions such as recruiting, hiring, performance review, professional development, compensation best practices, employee relations. That middle bullet point, I think, is what our HR generalist does.
Are you in agreement?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk through this area, Aurora, and see, I'm
So-
curious about what you recommend.
How it relates to me, absolutely. So recruitment, hiring, performance review, we have a draft out there that well, hopefully we'll be able to get to in the first quarter with the new board. Professional development, that's something we have talked about regarding training for employees. Compensation best practices. We're currently doing a wage and classification study, so we can kind of take a look at that and see where we're at. Employee relations, I think Christy touched on that a little bit. I probably do that every single day. Participate in contract negotiations. I have not done that, so that'll be upcoming with the firefighters contract. And then you mentioned the township training officer, so yes, that's one of the, not sure what that entails, in terms of if that's, in tandem with the fire department in terms of firefighter all the way up to their officers. So we've not really
Yeah,
discussed that yet.
and this township training officer, I mean, Kathy, this has been in this job description since 2021. We've never discussed what we meant by it. What I, as the person who wrote it, what I thought, what I was intending, but I don't know what you thought, Kathy, was that we would have somebody here in Township Hall who like, you know, kind of, let's say that a supervisor identifies, oh, somebody needs training in Excel or training in leadership or training in something technical. That training officer would be responsible for identifying that training, but would also be the person doing basic trainings on like first aid, CPR, MIOSHA, all the stuff that we need to stay in compliance with that frankly we haven't.
So that would be a separate position, another
I don't-
job?
I don't think it
or-
needs to be a separate position,
Okay.
but I'm thinking it would fall into either this kind of operations position or HR or maybe somewhere else. I don't know. What do you think, Kathy?
I don't know. So now are you defining this as an operations position?
Whatever it's defined, this says Township Administrator, Director of Operations. The working title we had since 2021 was Director of
Yeah.
Operations, which is what Diane Benson had recommended. Because she felt like, but, so whatever this position is, Kathy, I think this position could be a training officer, could be the training officer, or the training officer could be, you know, the HR, or it could be somewhere else in the organization.
So if I understood, you would suggest removing the entire HR function from this position? Was that what you
I
were?
could go either way. I definitely that middle bullet point. I think that we need to talk about what we mean by quote unquote personnel director, because it pops up in our ordinance, it pops up across our personnel handbook. And we have never been consistent on what we mean. Certainly the most recent training that Bill Thacker did with staff, and I think the direction that the handbook edits that are being proposed to us are going, are that we don't have a personnel committee anymore, that we do away with that, which we did up until a few years ago. And that people have HR issues, they go to the HR expert, which would be Aurora.
Okay, and so the HR generalist in that direction would then report directly to the Board of Trustees?
I don't know, they could report to the Board of Trustees, they could report to this position, either way.
Oh, okay, I just want to think through that.
Yeah.
Right now, we have, you know, different levels of not only experience, but also tenure and those reporting. We have a hierarchy. So if someone has a concern or is disgruntled, what's their avenue to address it before it blows up? So I always like to make sure that there are places for them to naturally go, so that it can be addressed.
Exactly.
And right now, I think Aurora, as the HR generalist, is the person. But beyond that, where does someone, because right now there's some issues floating around, so where would they go?
Aurora?
But what if Aurora is actually part of the disgruntlement, which I'm not saying, but what if the HR generalist is,
Legitimate question.
does the individual or individuals then come to the Board of Trustees?
Or to the township administrator?
Or, yeah, whereas if we
where-
remove it from the board of, from this position, then their next avenue is the
Right,
entire
which we don't
board,
want that.
which we don't want.
No, we don't want that.
That's it. So how do we address in unions, it's very straightforward.
Mhm.
They go to their steward and the
Mhm.
steward does, but we need to have an avenue for individuals to bring their concerns before they generate.
And I think that that's a good case to keep the HR generalist reporting to this position as is. The one thing I've seen that I do want to avoid though, is I don't want this position to become, if there is an HR issue that our HR generalist wants to bring to the board, needs to bring to the board, you know, and again, we would all do perfect hires and everything would go well, but let's say that this administrator position is not doing their job, which is, I've seen before, and then things don't get
Well,
processed.
that was voiced at our last.
And I saw that happen a lot with HR issues.
Okay, and so that's a good point, but that was raised at last meeting where a recent experience was the individual did not act upon things that were brought to her and was a buffer and they dissolved and were never addressed.
Mhm.
So that was what I drew from all the comments from last meeting was that ended up being that individual's MO. Whether it was residents who were raising issues or whether it was employees who were raising issues, she did not address.
And I'll just say one more thing that I'll be
Okay.
quiet is like, when I walked in here, definitely back to, and without naming names, but going back to the manager before Bryce. I'm thinking of HR issues that were not addressed, 5 managers.
Okay.
So HR in particular, I know there's a
Okay.
lot of issues. Oh, why didn't we know about this from the public? Or why did the manager get this letter? Things we like to complain about at the board table, I think is, you know, not as serious as some of the HR stuff where it's like, you know, they did what? Or, you know, like when we're thinking about things like, you know, complaints of workplace, we want them to have a channel to get resolved.
So
Before they leave, before they
Mhm.
leave. Mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
are we in agreement that the policy is that employees go to Aurora to look
As
live?
their first,
Right.
yes. Mhm.
It
I mean,
doesn't, it doesn't get lost there, right, Aurora, because you would manage that resolution.
and the one thing that's not listed, but I do believe you do, is onboarding. I mean, it's kind of a new word that was probably not used when this was written,
Yeah, but
but
that's in her job description.
yeah, that she would do is onboarding.
Okay.
So back to the township administrator, under supervises oversight of office coordinator, director of utilities, consulting contracts, it's right in the beginning. But what about project manager and parks
Yeah,
director?
they just didn't exist when we wrote this. That's a good point.
Okay,
But project management is in here. Right?
well, as the responsibility of the, manage projects, so that's the responsibility of the director of operations. But we have a whole position now that we didn't at the time.
I thought the project manager, when hired, because that was a new position. I thought they had it directed, had it directed to the supervisor. No? Okay.
No, so this is,
Maybe I just saw his
This is-
name on most of the things that came before us that,
There you go.
yes.
okay.
Okay, so there's actually 2 parts here. Management of projects. So would the director of operations continue to manage projects, or would our project manager take that task? And if it's the project manager, does the project manager report to the director of operations?
It just depends on what we mean by project management. I think those are 2 different uses of it. I think that,
So something that we need to clarify.
yeah, for sure, because those are 2, yeah.
Okay,
That whole job, I think, has to be
yeah, let's,
reworked.
okay, so, and then the parks director would report to the director of operations?
Mhm.
Okay.
So are we using township administrator or director of operations?
Well, it's
Clearly not sure yet.
Right. Give it both, township administrator, working title, director of operations.
I think,
And the fire,
just my past experience, it's easier for people outside of, the public sector. They know what a director of operations is. They won't be familiar with the township administrator. So I think that's where that working title came from, just from my experience.
Yeah.
And that makes
Um,
sense.
And then like when you post it as a job, it might be better to use that working title.
Mhm.
Yep.
So just to clarify, why is the fire chief removed from under the township or the director of operations?
That's what we discussed last meeting, that there was a direct reporting to the board.
Okay, so that's direct reporting, but then the director of utilities is not a direct report and neither is the parks director.
I apologize for missing the meeting. I would say either way, if the director of I think the director of utilities and fire chief should have the same
Right.
report. Like either they both report to the township administrator or they both report directly to the board. And I can go either way, but I think they should be treated the same since they're both life and safety essential services.
How much collaboration happens with the director of utilities with other departments and resources? Because the fire chief or the fire department is somewhat segregated, has their own operation. Whereas from what I observed, the director of utilities is integral to several departments, so that collaboration is essential.
True.
And so that's kind of how I look at where the reporting would be most effective.
I'm persuaded.
Because your department is involved, and your department is involved, a number of departments are
Buildings and
involved.
grounds.
In the fire,
Yes,
in fire department, he works with the fire department because of the you know, the things that dogs pee on.
I was gonna say fire hydrant.
Fire hydrants,
I was
thank you.
waiting for you to get to it though.
I need to have some lunch. I get too
No,
many.
I mean that, Judy. You make a good point and I'm
Yeah.
persuaded.
so that's
I like
where
that.
I
Picture.
see the reporting structure, effectiveness, organizational effectiveness, drives me on that
Yeah.
one.
I'm with you.
Mhm.
So we're suggesting director of utilities stays reporting to the director of operations.
Yeah, I'm persuaded by Judy.
Okay.
And I would put then the PPP director, and it does not imply to me that one is higher than the other in our structure. It's just from a reporting structure.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So I would suggest PPP, PM. It looks like, you know, we say IT, but it's now a position, no longer a contract.
So IT would report to. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, IT and HR are those things that just permeate across the organization. So I think you could do things differently. I think there's different ways it could work.
Okay, so just to be clear, project manager and parks director report to the director of operations.
That's what I would propose. And
Is
then
that
what
what-
other things?
That was said, I just wanna.
I think IT should too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that makes sense. HR, I'm not sure about, but I could go either way.
Yeah.
I mean, Aurora's also evolving her job and managing our benefits and doing all these things that frankly, nobody's ever done before. So,
Well, here,
right.
and then other positions assigned. That's the one thing that Scio loves to do is
And
add
we were
a
gonna
little
take that-
clause.
we were
And
taking that
anything
out.
else that we can throw on you, we're gonna have you do.
That should have been removed.
Okay,
What about code enforcement officer?
It needs to be separate. I mean, we need to have a code enforcement officer.
No, for sure, but should they report to this position or directly to the board? Cause I kind of like the
Manager.
board.
To
I think the
director of, manager, director of
I'm sorry,
operations,
manner.
administrator, whatever.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting back up to that point that Kathleen made when we started out, or that we discussed last, is that the scope of the job being quite
Exactly.
broad.
Now we're adding more, we're taking some away, but then adding more.
I just took three
I know,
sentences out.
I know, because, but that was one of our, conclusions from the last meeting that folks agreed upon about the breadth and scope of the job. Mhm. Even though they don't need deep knowledge of this, we're asking for true managerial, leadership.
And
Yes.
that person will report to the board.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So in
We had
theory,
that before.
we should be informed.
Theory and practice.
Yeah.
Well,
So we're
yeah.
gonna do better.
It's just been theory.
Yeah.
And in
You're right.
theory and in practice, they should take the opportunity to get their department heads in front of the board instead of them trying to net everything down to a 1 minute. I have nothing to report. You know, if I hear that one more time, when you know that the department heads are busting their tails.
Yep.
You know, what doesn't sit right here to me is that all these people are reporting to the director of operations who, in a way, will be their bosses. When the department heads, I'm thinking, and I know we're not there as far as how big we are, but in other municipalities, the department heads, who do they report to?
The board.
Directly.
Yeah, most places don't have a manager.
Well, and how are we going to make sure that they are in charge of their departments without being, you know, this director of operations saying, okay, this is what you're gonna do, even though I don't know anything about utilities or whatever.
But that would just be a poor choice for a director of operations if they did that. I mean, it's just, we need good management, right? I mean,
Yeah,
It's really good management that you need.
it just is a little, I don't know. I think we're saying that we want something different, but then we're creating the same thing in just different words. But maybe not, maybe this is just the beginning and we'll see.
I think one thing that's really different about this and this board is, I think that the manager for many years was used, the board tried to delegate their policy making to the manager. And I think that was wrong. And I'm glad we're not doing that.
Some board members. do.
Yeah, Kathy did not do that.
She did her own.
Jessica did not.
Okay. So contract management, okay. Where are we?
But that was the totality of what you thought needed to be removed.
That's the important stuff.
And now that we have a project manager, we need to define that relationship. Honestly, our project manager is not doing the role, the traditional definition of a project manager. But that's because not given any direction.
Well, and more than that, and I agree,
So much.
it needs more direction, but also don't forget, we said we need a finance director, an HR person, and a project manager. And we said we needed those three things. And then we didn't fill any of them for years.
Right.
And then we created a parks director.
Right.
And then we said, oh, wait, yeah, that was a good idea. Let's get an HR person. Thank you. And then we said, oh, let's fill that project manager. Whoops. We never reconciled the parks director position because the project manager was supposed to manage parks to start. Half time. Yeah, the project manager, this was in our administrative committee. These were our best ideas. That it was a project manager. I said we need a finance director, an HR person. And then we said, and a project manager. Alec Jerome and Jane Vogel and the 2020 board, they were all on board. And half of that person's time would be parks. And then we added in, there'll be the climate change officer. They'll do some of the analytics, they'll do GIS, but some of these technical stuff. So we never sorted it out.
So That was in lieu of a parks director.
Yes, and then the board decided to create a parks director in fall of 2022. And then the board hired a parks director, and then we've had rotating cast of characters on the board and a rotating cast of characters as a manager. And so those haven't really gotten fully sorted out. Now, Murphy and Chris are both doing a very good job, but we've not optimized either one of those positions.
Yeah,
Okay.
Kathleen,
Yeah.
just, you finished?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. Facilities management. This is another thing, responsible for the preservation and maintenance of township property, tools and equipment. Wouldn't that fall under the building? I don't know, I just see them, you know, polishing their little hammers. I mean, what does that mean? Management, okay, the next one makes sense. Third one, participates in construction and renovations projects as needed. Wouldn't that be the project manager?
Me?
It's not me. It's not me.
I don't know.
And then,
I don't know where it's coming.
administer requests of phone, cell, internet, and access to buildings. Wouldn't that be IT?
Well, Christie or IT, but yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
coordinate disposition of property. What does that mean?
Selling
Selling
things.
You know, getting rid of the old
Get rid of-
computers, asset management.
Yes,
Oh, not land.
It
Okay,
could
could
be,
be,
Could
but I
be.
mean,
could be a computer or land or a car.
now wouldn't that also be under, the different departments?
You know, this facilities management, I actually think fits well in this position, Jillian. I think some of these tasks they might delegate.
Oh, so then we have to look at what is building maintenance responsible for?
Well, like, for example, like capital assets management, like, you know, everything from a computer, Julia, you know, needs to dispose of some old computers. It relates to finance, it relates to IT, it relates to fire. It is very cross-departmental. So I think this disposition of property really fits well in this position. It's overarching township.
Yeah, I just. Okay.
Because we don't wanna have, you know, utilities way of disposing of property and IT way of disposing of property. It's just
Well,
one disposition.
no,
It's the management.
This one is confusing for me, the facilities management. In that Brandon, or I'll try and keep it generic, the utilities department has responsibility for its facilities. So I would not see this position responsible, I mean, other than in a hierarchical manner.
Yes,
Managing the assignment of office and workspace, seems like it's the office coordinator.
agreed.
So that goes away because it would reside under the office coordinator. Participates in construction and renovation as needed. Whenever you use an as needed, it's trouble for holding someone responsible for
Yeah, so-
as anything with as
Mhm.
needed.
So is that person going to be responsible for when there's a sewer main break?
That's why whenever as needed, it's like a catch-all, like.
So what do you recommend?
I-
Yes or no, in or out?
I would eliminate, this section, other than to minimize it about what the disposition of property. That's, now, I'll ask Kathleen, how, do you see that somewhere under that purchasing manager role?
Of disposition. of property.
Disposition of property, because it can sometimes involve selling it can sometimes involve repurposing it, and so do you see something like that falling under a purchasing like role or not? I mean, I know
If you
it's
don't-
not a straight purchasing.
If you don't have a purchasing agent specialized for the township, that it's a part-time assignment to somebody else, it's just too broad,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, so,
So I think it's, you know, Judy, this is where, you know, it's sort of like, you know, the insurance, like this is the stuff where like Rebecca Christie me, Rebecca Christie me, the stuff like, it's like, okay, our insurance, okay, all of our land, all of our stuff, the value of it. We got it all into a fixed asset module, like, you know, we piecemeal this stuff, but when it comes to disposition, sure, we have a draft capital asset management policy. We work through it, we get it what's needed for accounting purposes and for insurance purposes, but we've never here done like thoughtful, strategic, fixed asset management. We haven't even managed our vehicles. Like, we don't even have fleet management, much less more complexity. That's why I asked Andrea to come up with a list of all of our properties. So like, in terms of like asset management in a real sense, the township has not done that.
Okay, I can see asset management, not facilities management.
Agreed.
But
Okay.
asset management, because that,
Yeah,
that aligns with contract management and
Yes.
the way I see how they can connect.
I agree. with
So
you.
asset management and disposition of property would fall under asset management.
Agree.
Yeah,
And risk management,
so some of
Yeah,
these,
yes.
which we haven't talked about. We've never assigned anybody as, and we had this in one of our previous job descriptions, risk management. And I don't know how that fell out, but, yeah, risk management. So in terms of like who manages risk for the township, I think this person should be assigned to keeping an eye on that.
some of these
Yeah.
other items under asset management now, I guess. Like the building, the responsible for preservation and maintenance of township property. Well, if that's under, let's say, utilities, then, and then we have office and workspace management under office coordinator, then we have the project in IT, they're all going to report to that.
Yeah, but they would be those other people's responsibility. They wouldn't,
That's kind of what
in
they're doing
terms of
now.
a scope, though, this person would never have to even allot time to those unless it was beyond the other person's abilities to do that.
Agree.
Okay, so to keep it in there or to?
I would eliminate it from
Yeah,
their
that's what I
job
meant.
because it really resides lower.
Within the, yeah,
Mhm.
and then they will, something comes up, then.
It'll bubble up if needed, which is the way management,
Mhm.
you know, it only comes up if, I mean, if Christie can't fight off people who's gonna get which office,
Yeah, no kidding, it's fine.
then someone else.
I
will
won
win.
and she lost.
actually,
Yeah.
maybe I should do a process check right now, because
Okay,
I suggested that we try to, stay within timeframes, which we are there. We've got another meeting next Monday. We can pick this up.
Okay.
All right.
Kathleen, do you have enough so far what we've gotten through to do your next revision, just like you did with this one?
Yes,
I think this is excellent.
So you guys are still on F2, right?
yes.
This is, I think this is, I think this is excellent because you can make these changes and then we can just continue to work down and give us any assignments.
Okay. All right, so, then we're gonna move right to public comment. We'll pick this stuff up, all right?
next week, same time.
Yep. I'll try to get these materials out sooner.
Please,
Thank
yeah.
Well,
Cash forwarded right now.
Thank you,
And by
Judy.
minutes.
Is there anyone that wishes to speak at public comment? Please raise your Zoom hand.
It'll be the 15th, 16th.
16.
I don't see anyone with hands raised.
Okay, and one last thing, I added an agenda item that we can discuss next time is, I think we should put some parameters on how long are we gonna do this? To try to work to it, that we finalize by a certain timeframe.
Well,
I'd agree.
Something to
I agree.
think about.
And if I could just, food for thought, don't forget, December 20th internally is the deadline for departments, including Christie, to provide her budget request. So December 20th is the day internally that everywhere else in the organization is putting in requests regarding positions. So it would, I think, make sense to aim toward at least having a rough idea about if and what position we want.
Kathleen, do you mean, when you ask your
Yeah.
question, you mean like time frame for when we're gonna come up with a written product, or time frame for written product and opening the position, advertising the position, hiring the position, all of that, or just for the work product that we're?
So a time frame that we finish our job description,
Okay,
piece these other things out. We would establish a salary, we
The
would
range.
arrange, yep. We would determine the method of recruiting and hiring.
okay.
And then that process starts of recruiting and hiring,
And
because we've defined it all.
Yeah, and the
Whatever.
biggest job is the,
Okay.
the description, the job description. Everything after that, I think is gonna be pretty easy.
Is it feasible to say that first meeting
Well, of
in
course, 'cause you're involved.
January? Well, we don't, this doesn't have to go to the trustees, but like, one meeting in January, we finalize this job description?
I think it would make sense to formally, like, you know, at some point, the board needs to adopt this job description. I would say also that at that time, when we're ready, that the board would, I would propose that the board repeal the job description in the ordinance because it conflicts with what you guys have come up with. So I'm just saying, if
Yeah, the
Scio
ordinance.
Township wants one job description for this job, whatever this becomes, the way to do it would be for the Board of Trustees to adopt it by resolution and repeal the code of ordinances unless you guys, unless what we come up with matches exactly, but thus far it does not.
Well, we could repeal the ordinance at any time because we don't have
We,
that
we,
position.
well,
And I
we,
think-
we could, except that it's certainly, there's been spirited debates at the board table about how the ordinance controls, and it does control. Whatever we adopt by resolution, the ordinance still controls.
Right.
People are still gonna Google and say, oh, Scio Township has a manager that does these things that they put forth in an ordinance 25 years ago.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If we could repeal that ordinance at any time, and maybe it's best that we get on that right now, because.
I would
think that
suggest we
things-
do it concurrently, like so that everybody's on the same page. So whatever we're doing, we do it once. Like when this committee's work is done.
It's not gonna change anything to do it now.
Right.
How long, to repeal an ordinance, are there other steps?
In Scio Township, no. Most places have rules of order that would require a first reading or second reading, but us, we can just, bam.
I love the sound effect.
Jillian, you're the supervisor.
Okay, I know one member has 3 o'clock, so
Yeah, have fun.
Motion to adjourn.
can we have a second?
Support by Riser?
All in favor?
So did
Aye.
you-
I. Motion made.
Okay,
Oh, say it again.
I said aye as well.
Motion by Yeaple, support by Riser.
Thank you for your work on this, Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen.
Thank
Thank you,
are we
Judy.
still live?
Yep,
It's just like, now I go back to work.
thank you, everybody.